Hello, Jamie.
Hi
I'm
there.
not. Hey, Jamie, welcome. Everybody's waving. We got a lot of people here who've come in, conductors from all around the world, from Taiwan to America to Italy to all sorts of places. And we're just getting started. I'm letting everybody know that why we're doing this, because as you know, and here I have the evidence, I remain one of Lenny's strongest advocates. And like many of my colleagues, as I said, those who are here now and many others who are on the podium as we speak, I've been greatly influenced by his music. I've had the chance to conduct it all and record a lot of it, and even be the principal conductor of the Bernstein Centennial at the Pacific Music Festival, which he founded in Japan, at one of his many festivals that he founded. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. What makes Bernstein's music so special to hear? What makes it so popular? What makes it joyful to play? What makes the music so American, if you can say that? What makes it even so Mahlerian, given he was really one of the great Mahlerian conductors? What makes it Jewish? What makes it difficult? What makes it drive critics crazy? Probably drove you and your family crazy a little bit too. What is the difference between Jeremiah and his Kaddish Symphony, despite both of them having a liturgical basis? What is the relevance of his Age of Anxiety, and with the Auden quote, and what makes it timeless but also topical with the events in Israel today? How do we conduct his music actually, and what makes it so Lenny? So these are the questions that we're going to talk about. We're going to try to answer in the masterclass, and it's also featured in my book, Lenny and me on conducting Bernstein symphonies. So we'll be talking and identifying about what is Lenny's conducting technique. We made a little mention of it by the fact that most of the people who saw Maestro last night on Netflix, I being among them, and our serendipitous correspondence during the screening, is that his technique is a little bit different than what Bradley was actually doing, learning from Yannick Mezets. Again, I mean, he did a great job given the circumstances, not being a real professional conductor. He did a fantastic job, but it wasn't really Lenny's technique per se, which of course had a lot more wrist and elbow action as he subdivided a lot, and had influences from people like Charles Munch and Fritz Reiter and Kusevitsky and others. And Yannick, who's such a wonderful conductor, has a lot of physical energy and activity. And so what I'm talking about is basically in the zone of your conducting, where one conducts, the length of the baton, of using a baton, has a lot to do with body size and body language. And Bradley being 6 feet tall is a lot different from Yannick being only about 5'7". And Lenny was not so tall.
On a good
How
day.
tall was? Yeah, how tall was Lenny actually on a good day? How was that?
He was not tall at all. He just had a big
Yeah,
head, so he always looked very imposing. And
yeah.
the line that was most often spoken backstage after a concert was, "Oh, you look so much taller on the podium." It
And of course, when it's
really,
if he hunches his shoulders, which he often did,
yeah.
it
But he had
it can
that
compress.
leonine head, which made him, and
Right.
big shoulders. He had it was his legs that were short, but the rest of him looked tall.
Yeah,
So
we have that
he
upper
gave me an
body
impression of
muscular
height. But
quality.
he was
So
probably about 5'8" on a really good day with his Cuban heels.
other themes that we're going to talk about is about love, because as Lenny often pointed out, it's so central to understanding his music, and without this understanding, one can never conduct his music. And we hear in the new movie Maestro a famous quote from Edna St. Vincent Millay that's echoed often: "If the summer doesn't sing in you, then nothing sings in you, and if nothing sings in you, then you can't make music." So we are conductors, and music sings in us as the summer shines in our souls. And so we're going to try to discover what Lenny says about this in his symphonies, as I said, based on my book. But uh, everybody's going to get their free access to Joanne Falletta's Respighi Master Class on January 17th. And it's my way of saying thank you to all the people who have registered. There's going to be a lot more in 2024. We rescheduled the Puccini Masterclass with Frederick Chaslin. There's going to be a Verdi Masterclass with Colorizzi, a Bartok with Gabor Takasnaji, and many more, even a Mahler Masterclass. I wish Lenny was here. He could have done it. But first, we welcome our special guest, Jamie Bernstein. Jamie is an accomplished author, her narrator, director, broadcaster, and filmmaker, and more. And she'll be a keynote speaker at the International Conductors Guild Conference in New York in January, where I think some of you might be. And she is, of course, Lenny's daughter and author of the now famous book herself, Famous Father Girl, which no doubt may have even influenced the writers and director of Maestro, Bradley Cooper. So, welcome, Jamie.
Thank you.
First, I must ask about Maestro, which I and many millions others watched as we were talking. I know you were at the Venice Film Fest premiere. Sadly, I couldn't get in, but Bradley Cooper and his Lenny Nose and Carey Mulligan, and she's just spectacular, and Maya Hawke playing you, and it's really great. But now you're the famous Bernstein making the rounds all over the media in the world. So how do you feel about it? I mean, while we conductors try our best, if anyone can follow in his footsteps, it should be you, because you are genetically predisposed.
Yeah, but we're not genetically predisposed to take his place as conductors. No.
Truly. It's hard to follow in those footsteps.
What happened was that because of the Screen Actors Guild strike, both Bradley Cooper and Carey Mulligan and all other actors who belong to that union were not permitted to do any promotional activity for any films they had made that year. So that meant that just as Maestro was premiering, being born at these film festivals in Venice and London and New York, they couldn't attend, which was heartbreaking. I felt so bad for Bradley because, it was like not being at the birth of your own baby. And so Netflix, the distributor, had to do some scrambling to figure out how to make the event work in their absence. And so the various heads of departments in the film, the editor and the art director and the makeup artist, Kazuhiro, who is a hero, and all the others, plus my brother and sister and I were conscripted into going to all these festivals and sort of doing the sorts of things that Bradley and Carey would have been doing, like giving interviews, introducing the film, doing the Q&A afterwards, all that stuff. So we were like the booby prize for the press, was how I thought of it. Because really, if you're a journalist who writes about film and you're really looking forward to interviewing Bradley Cooper, and instead you get these three nebbishy Bernstein kids, it's like, what a letdown. But anyway, so that's what we did.
I wonder what people might have thought when there was that call on that fateful day when Bruno Walter was sick and suddenly somebody else got conscripted. And
yes,
was it a letdown to the public at the beginning? And look how it turned out.
Some people walked out. Some people walked out. They thought, oh, no Bruno Walter, forget it, I'm out of here.
Yeah, that happened, but
weren't they sorry later?
Weren't they sorry later? So let's talk a little bit about Famous Father Girl. I mean, what inspired you to finally write that book at this time? And I mean, did Bradley read it, and did it influence the film in any way? Or the screenwriters? There's a lot of you in the movie, so I would think it must have had a big impact.
Yeah, it was. I'm just going to post something for you all to read. So what happened was that I was constantly asked, as my brother and sister and I are all constantly asked, what was it like? What was it like growing up with Leonard Bernstein? And so my short answer that I developed to answer this question was, well, it wasn't boring. But then the longer answer to that question was my book. And so a friend of mine who was a literary agent pointed out that if I wrote the book and it came out in my father's centennial year, 2018, I might sell a couple of books. And this very pragmatic piece of advice kind of shot me out of the cannon. And I thought, oh yeah, he's right. And this is the moment, and I'm going to do it. And I did it. And it actually turned out to be very good preparation for the journey of the film, Maestro, because my brother and sister and I talked a lot about our experience of growing up in our family. And we discussed a lot of the thornier issues. And I told my brother and sister that I was going to show them every chapter I wrote, and that they had total veto power over anything I wrote. And in the end, they completely gave me the green light. And so forward I went. But because we had gone through that process ourselves for the book, we were in a really good place to help Bradley and talk to Bradley about what he wanted to do. And yes, he went to my book numerous times, and I was just looking for the link to send you all, because I just wrote an article for Time magazine.
Oh, wonderful.
In which I talk about what the connections, some of the connections between my book and the screenplay of the film, because in fact, Bradley did take a number of things and put it into his movie that could have come from nowhere else but my book. So there was a real synergy there, and I was really happy that the work that I had done turned out to be useful for the next round of work.
Bravo to you. I mean, hero is absolutely a hero, and certainly all that controversy over we talk about the Jufro, but the Junos, I mean, it actually helped promote the film. So, as long as they didn't spell the name wrong, everything was fine. But
yeah, it's the old, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Right, bad publicity. But let me just ask you a question about that. When you first saw Bradley in that makeup, what was your reaction?
Oh, we flipped out. We couldn't believe it. He would send us photographs on his phone from the makeup room where he and Kazu were working on creating the various Lennys at different stages of his life, right? And so some of these photographs, we could clearly tell that it was Bradley in makeup. But every now and then there would be one where we would go, because it was so exact. I mean, it could have been our dad. And Bradley himself, as an actor, did so much beyond the makeup and the prostheses and all of that. The way he held his body, the way he hunched, the way he held a cigarette, but like all those things. So Bradley really did his homework.
Yeah,
I've never seen anyone take a deeper dive in anything. It was amazing how much trouble he went to achieve authenticity.
Well, let's talk about this growing up with Lenny, because it does have an impact on how we understand his music. And because so much of Lenny's music was either liturgical or philosophical, and particularly the three symphonies, how much of that Judaism did that permeate in your life growing up? I mean, are you a practicing Jew? May I ask?
No, I'm not a practicing Jew. As a family, we take our Passover Seders very seriously. That's the piece of Judaism that we really buy into, because
Nina got to get the Apple, so that she probably loved it.
we loved it, and we had great Seders growing up, and we continue to have great Seders with lots of laughter and irreverence always, and yet we bring our hearts to that table, So growing up, that it was all about the Seder. We lit the Hanukkah candles, but it's really hard to sustain that for 8 nights. I'm sorry, it's just a lot. So chances were
depends how many presents you get, but I understand.
Yeah, but we also celebrated Christmas, so we didn't get presents for Hanukkah, really.
Right.
So it was, and let's face it, Hanukkah is a minor Jewish holiday, and it's very bad luck for Hanukkah that it has to compete with Christmas. It can't, and it wasn't ever supposed to. So anyway, we lit our candles when we could remember, but the big event was Christmas. And similarly, we would have our wonderful Seders, and then Easter would come around and we'd have a big egg hunt for the kids. So it was like that, which is not uncommon in the United States.
Sure, of course. But it is such an important part about Lenny's music. How much
the thing is,
Judaism...
if I can just add, that, these family rituals were not the place where my father really expressed his spirituality. It's really in his music that you can track very clearly his own wrestlings with his creator and his own questions about his existence and all of our existences. That's all right there in the music. And that's what makes those symphonies so emotional, so moving, mass as well. And Chichester Psalms, they are all, they're on the same track of asking,
Got it.
same, fist shaking at the heavens. If you're up there taking care of us, why is everything such a mess down here? And why are we all so terrible to each other? And why can't we all just, pull it
Get
together
along.
and be
Yeah.
kind? So it's all in the music.
It's the same as Allah mentioned, werden Bruder. It's the same message being said. So
Well, because Beethoven was doing the same tussle in his music.
he also had
fighting.
a glass in his hand all the time, and we have no idea if Beethoven smoked a cigarette either. But I wouldn't have been surprised if he did something. Look, I need to ask you a very important question before we get started on our discussion about the music, because in fact, I'm going to start with the Third Symphony with the Kaddish, because it's not only the one that I know so well, having recorded it, having performed it all over the world, as you know, both with the Bernstein original text as well as Sam Pizar's text. Those of you who are online, if you don't know about the Sam Pizar text, just let me give you I'll talk about it a little bit after we speak with Jamie, but he is an important name, no doubt, as the youngest survivor from Auschwitz. And there is a history of Sam Pizar, who grew up as a very important man, even in the Kennedy cabinet, in the policy of economic policy committee for JFK, who ironically, after JFK was assassinated, Lenny dedicated the Kaddish in his memory. But today, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, happens to be Sam Pizar's stepson. And so there is a timelessness and a topicality to the symphony that maybe we might not necessarily have even expected. But I think that what I want to ask you about, Jamie, is that there's a third text to the Kaddish. You wrote one. You are a prodigious writer. You also contributed to your father's opus in a variety of ways. We actually made the Bernstein beat together in Seville. And I'd like to know what inspired you to make your own text to the Kaddish. Was that an invitation to do so? Was that your own voluntary action? How did that come about, and what relevance did that have to your the narration of the music?
It was so not my own idea. It was James Conlon's idea. And he invited me to narrate the existing narration at the Cincinnati May Festival. And I said, no way, I will never do the Kaddish narration for many reasons, but one of them was that the very first line of the narration is, "Oh, my Father," which is supposed to be addressing God, but how embarrassing it would be for me to say those words and everybody wondering, who is she talking about, her dad? That just seemed so impossibly embarrassing.
Was there any truth to it being actually about Lenny talking to Sam, to his father?
Well, I mean, we don't have time to get into this, but my father's fist shaking at his creator was very much intertwined between his spiritual creator and his biological creator, and that was an interlacing of questions and anger. So yeah. Anyway, so I told Maestro Conlon, forget it. And he said, well, write your own one, write your own narration. And I said, oh, all right, I'll see if I can get permission, because I was sure I would not. And then I would be free of the obligation, right? And then to my astonishment, I got permission. And then I was sort of stuck with the gig. But the other thing was that I really had a problem with Kaddish. The original narration was written expressly for our mother, Felicia, to narrate. And she was an actress. And her narration, the recording of her narration, is very dramatic. And
Latina.
When it came out, my brother and sister and I, well, Nina was a baby. And Alexandra and I were like, 9 and 6, or we were really young. And so we couldn't bear to listen to our mother's melodramatic voice on that recording. It just gave us the willies. It was just too, it made us so uncomfortable. So that was part of my discomfort with the symphony. And also it's very difficult. It's thorny and there's all that 12 tone in it. So what with one thing and the other, I had a sort of mild allergy to the Kaddish Symphony for a really
But
long time. But now I had this gig. So I had to immerse myself in the symphony. And that's when I discovered how fabulous the music actually is.
indeed.
So it was a blessing in disguise that I had to do this narration of my own. And when I added my own narration, what was I going to do or say? And I wound up adding another layer, another sedimentary layer of argument with my own father. And this is very Talmudic, because in the Talmud, this enormous centuries long written Jewish tome, the rabbis from one generation write something, and then the rabbis from the next generation write, square around that text. And then there's another generation of rabbis that write around that text. So there are these sort of concentric squares of argument. So I felt that I was in that tradition, adding my own argument with my father. And my argument with him was, why do you insist on writing this incredibly difficult, thorny, alienating music when I know you want to write a tune? I know you want to write a melody. And of course, the most difficult passages in Kaddish inevitably lead to this gorgeous, blooming melody. And so I really felt that I was taking what I was saying right out of the music. It wasn't like I had to shoehorn anything into my argument. I felt it was right there in the music.
That's
so
fascinating.
That's what I did.
That's interesting. Okay, last question I need to ask you. There's an incredible moment in the movie where Bradley Cooper portraying Bernstein is talking about the two different sides of his schizophrenic life, and where he is the conductor in the public sphere and the composer in the private sphere. And we all know that he struggled to have a larger output of works, though one might argue that, at least from my perspective, and I think many people would agree with me, for the most part, whatever he did do, he hit a home run, even Mass. So, which is, in my opinion, a great masterpiece. So, how do you, first of all, as his daughter, how did you experience those two different aspects of his personality, the public and the private, and what impact did that have for him as a conductor versus the composer? And to put a tail on that, you are a writer, you are a creator, you are a person that deals with the private and the public as well. Do you see a similarity between what your father experienced and what you've experienced?
Yeah, nobody ever asked me that before, but
Well, I know
I guess
you,
there's a
Jamie,
similarity.
so I'm asking you. So there we go.
Okay. Well, it's absolutely true. He identified his issue very clearly in that interview that he gave, where he talks about it being almost like schizophrenia, where there was the side of him that was connected to people and very extroverted and communicating and being with, orchestras and audiences and parties and playing the piano and just being that exuberant, people hugger that he was. But as a creative artist, it has to be, by definition, a solitary task. And he actually hated being alone. And so what would happen is that he would be on the road, let's say on tour, conducting and having the total extroverted conductor, communicator life. And then he would come off the road and he would have carved out 6 to 8 weeks in his busy schedule in which he would have no conducting engagements, and he could finally sit down in his studio and compose a new piece, right? And so what tended to happen was that it would take about 4 or 5 weeks for him to simmer down and also dump everybody else's notes from his head so that he could start to find some notes of his own. And he would, just start to get a little momentum going with his composing. And then, 6 weeks are over, time to go back on the road. And so he was constantly stripping his gears, going from the one half of himself to the other. And it really was hard for him. But in retrospect, I think we can marvel that he was able to accomplish as much as he did and to compose as much as he did. He felt very regretful at the end of his life that he hadn't composed more. But honestly, given how much he was doing, it's amazing that he had the output that he did. You know, it's just remarkable how much you can get done when you never sleep. He was such an insomniac, and so he basically lived double the life that of the 72 years that he had, because he just never closed his eyes, which meant he also never stopped smoking.
So if everybody thought that Fritz Reiner was a vampire, maybe that was an early influence on his life.
I bet it was. Well, I think he was a night owl from
But
the
what about
get.
you? But what about you? You are public, you are private, you're a creator, you're a writer, narrator, filmmaker. You do so much yourself. Where do you find the time to do that? It's a very busy time for you now, but you've always been a very active person as far as I know.
Yeah,
So
I guess,
how
I
do you
mean,
do it?
I think it's similar. I'm very gregarious, and I love to get together with people. I love talking to people. I love doing what I'm doing right now. I think it's really fun to be a communicator, and and I love being by myself. My father didn't,
Mm,
but I really love it. And
mm.
so the minute I'm done with a trip or a thing or a gig, whatever it is, all I want to do is go to our house in Connecticut, the one you can see in the film Maestro, with my dog, and just be all alone with my dog, walking in the woods and writing in my journal and making tuna salad and eating it standing up at the kitchen counter, and nobody's bothering me. I love that.
The
So,
tuna salad, again, the tuna, just like in the movie where she's holding him and he says, I smell tuna and cigarettes.
oh yeah, that's funny.
You got that taste. Okay.
Our
That's
family
funny.
theme.
You know, loving people is a big part of this. I remember when I met Lenny in Houston during A Quiet Place, and we had our time to work together. And he said to me, said to my mom, he says, your son's going to be a conductor like me, not a pianist. And he said, why? He says, he likes people too much. And that's the instrument. And he's right.
Yeah.
So,
And I have to say that Bradley Cooper, it turns out to be very much like my dad this way, and that he
wow.
brought that same vibe to the making of his film that my father would bring to conducting an orchestra or whatever the enterprise was that he was in, that it was all so full of love and open-heartedness and all embracingness. And um, my brother and sister and I didn't particularly get it at the beginning, that Bradley had this quality that was so similar to our dad, but it turned out he really was like that. He was that guy that, hugs for everybody, very emotional, easily brought to tears, the whole thing. We were astonished. So it turned
Wow.
out he was the right guy for the job. He really was.
And you are the right person to talk to us right now. I think we're all just amazed by what you're sharing with us, this kind of inside backstage pass with you. So, um, Jamie, I know you got to go, and we just have maybe a few minutes. Does anybody have any particular question that you'd like to ask Jamie at this time? We've got some wonderful conductors who are with us, winners and prize winners of our Bucharest Music Institute masterclass and competition. We have also everyone from Wendy to Min Chao to Mike Chang, Lorenzo Padrin, Jonathan Snowden, John Moon, Enrique Valde, Debbie Quo. They're all here. Debbie has, by the way, been studying with Marin Alsop. She was admitted as a fellow at Marin's workshop. So does anybody have a particular question that you would like to ask? Now is the time. Any questions?
Any questions?
Jonathan. Okay, hang on. You can unmute, Jonathan. Here we go.
All right. Well, am I audible to all, first of all? Just want to.
Yep.
Okay, very good. I see nodding heads. This isn't a particular question, but I just wanted to say for anyone here who has not read Famous Father Girl that you should run, not walk, to the closest bookstore. I attended an event that you did, and I guess it was 2018 on your book tour, and I read it then, And I've subsequently listened again this year to your narration on Audible, which is also lovely. And so it really, anyone who wants to get that kind of behind the scenes feeling of what it was like to just live in that ethos and in that energy of Bernstein and in that unique family, you got to go read the book. So it's just a
bravo.
Thank you,
Jonathan.
shout out. Your commission is in the mail.
Oh, thank you. I'm waiting for it.
Any other question? Anybody? Okay, Jamie, I just want to say, who was it? Who's asking?
There's one question right here.
If
in
it's
the chat.
possible.
There we go, Lorenzo. Sì, certo.
Yes. So, I imagine that you listen to Bernstein music before and after. Like, did that change over time, the way you listen to his music? How did that feel? Like how does that impact you on a personal level, on a musical level, to listen to his music, as soon as he wrote it, as soon as it was premiered, and maybe 20 years later?
That's a really good question, because
wonderful.
It takes a long time to digest a work of art that is, dense and intricate and complex. And so it's definitely been a lifelong process of discovery to get a deeper understanding of our dad's works. And over the years, my favorites change. I've become a huge fan of Serenade, which is it's a sort of violin concerto. It's just the most delicious piece. I love it. I've also had a tremendous evolution in my relationship to Mass. And of course, I already talked about how much I changed in my relationship to Kaddish, Symphony No. 3. So yes, there's definitely a process of morphing and evolution that happens over the years. Plus, after our father died, and we found ourselves missing his physical presence so very much, we quickly figured out that listening to his music was the next best thing to getting a hug from him, because his love is in his music. And, if he could have, he would have hugged every single person in the world. That's the kind of guy he was. And that was impossible. But in a way, he did it through his music. He did manage to hug everyone through his music. So when we listen to his notes, we feel so embraced by our dad. It's the next best thing to getting that big, rib cracking, scruffy faced hug from our dad.
That's beautiful. Jamie, thank you so much for allowing us to learn a lot more about Lenny. The movie is wonderful because it gives you that personal understanding of the human being that he was. He's a god to us all, but I think, and for many people, he's a myth. But the movie makes him very human, and you make him very close and intimate to us. We would love to call Lenny our friend the moment that we're on the podium, and it's not just the music of his that we might conduct, but it's all the music that we might conduct, knowing that Lenny might give us a little bit of a tap on the shoulder and say, "You're doing good. You're doing good."
Great. Well, I hope you all get a chance to conduct lots of Bernstein music.
So let's get started. Jamie, thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, John, for inviting me. Good luck
to everybody. Lots of love. Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, Happy holidays.
Happy New Year, everything. Take care. Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Okay, everybody, stay online. Wow, that was something, wasn't it?